This is day 3 of the Afreximbank annual meetings here in the Bahamas, and I am thrilled to be joined on Afreximbank TV, the Minister of State within the Ministry of Finance of Ghana, the Honorable Abena Osei-Asare. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I listened to your remarks yesterday. I was truly inspired.
Thank you.
How has the discussions been for you so far over the course of the last 2 days?
I think the discussion has been very good, and I want to use this opportunity to thank the Afreximbank and the people of the Bahamas for such very good performance in terms of planning, in terms of executing whatever it is that we came here to achieve. And the quality of resources that they have brought in here has been phenomenal, and it's been good so far. And like everybody keeps saying, now is the time for action. Let's talk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so speaking of action, what do you believe the role of governments, including your own government, in terms of driving the changes that are going to be necessary? Because, I mean, this is something that will have to, the discussions are taking place, and then the policies and the regulatory framework need to be put in place. And so what do you perceive to be the kinds of actions that are going to be required of governments in the next stage?
I think for government, you need to provide the linkages. And because most of us have the governance structures and the policies in place. We have the social policies in place, we have the trade policies in place. But how do you put them into action? In terms of the trade policy, we all heard one of the panel discussants mention that from now to the year 2050, the African Americans in the diaspora have about 103.5 trillion funding to give. How do we tap into this to help transform Africa and the Caribbean and the diaspora? So these are the linkages that I believe we should put in place and make things work. One is the integration of our systems. And I'm happy the Pan-African payment system, which Afrexim is using, it's gaining grounds, and we are encouraging each and every person in that space, the African space, to use it as well. We also have to provide the linkages of taking away the barriers, like the usual visas that African members will have to take before they travel into any of the African countries. We also heard Dangote say that for him to go around Africa, he will need about 35 visas. This does not augur well for trade. Yeah. And so once we need to transform, we need to break away from these barriers. And again, we need to give confidence and to the people coming in to invest. How have we put our structures in place, our public financial management, the things that will help people when in doing business to ease the cost of doing business. So these are some of the things that as government we can put in place. But the most important thing is creating that enabling environment for the private sector to thrive. Because the kind of capital that the private sector will bring on board is way more than what the governments can do. A typical example is Dangote's 19 billion investment in the refinery. No African country government can have that on its balance sheet. So then once we create that environment for the private sector to thrive, I believe that will serve as the linkage to help transform Africa.
Do you think the political will is there, though? I mean, we're having these discussions, and so it indicates evidence of political will, but after these conversations are had, then when we go back to our countries, just the incentive to actually implement some of that.
That is why we're saying that the political will alone is not enough, but the political action. Yeah. What are we doing? We have put measures in place like the trade policy of the AFCFTA. How are we actualizing it in terms of our raw materials? How are we using it to benefit our people? And so these are some of the things that I believe we should look at. The typical example I mentioned again was the African free trade. There are internal policies that restrict the full implementation of the AFCFTA. When we go back to our country, it is not just about the political will, but the political action to take some of these obstacles away so that we can, as much as possible, tap into that 3.5 trillion that is out there for Africans to also use to transform the economy. And so it's now time for not just the political will, but the political action after that will to make sure we actualize whatever we mean.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned the private sector and investments. Do you have any particular innovative solutions that you think that that can be implemented, and projects that can be implemented as one of those first steps to bridge the two regions?
Currently, what is really lacking or is not in adequate form is our infrastructure gap and our technology gap. Everything is now about technology. And so we need to tap into that. And I'm happy Afreximbank is investing into that, as well as energy, because the cost of energy in Africa is way too high. And I believe something should be done. And I'm happy the Afrexim is helping to build these industrial parks. So making certain infrastructure available.
Yeah.
In terms of the energy, in terms of road, in terms of supporting ports work. What was signed, the agreement that was signed yesterday between Afrexim and a Ghanaian company in terms of port services. These are some of the linkages that we need, and I'm happy Afreximbank is into that. And it will make the cost of doing business relatively cheaper. So you just plug in and pay for what you have. The enabling environment is already there. And so with this, what government can do is to take away any obstacle that will prevent the flow or the easy flow of some of these infrastructures, because government alone cannot fund the infrastructure gap. There's an infrastructure gap of about 170 million every billion every year. And clearly, no African country, no African government alone can do that. And that is why we want to tap into the Afrexim and also give the private sector that space to utilize it to transform our nation.
How about some important lessons that we can transpose from the arrangements within Africa? Because now we're talking about the Caribbean and expanding the Global Africa Initiative. What are some of those lessons you think, immediate lessons that we can say, we've looked at how it's worked here, now that we want to sort of connect the rest of the world or the diaspora, African diaspora, here are some key things that we need to touch on.
Okay, I heard one of our people say that there's a chocolate factory here. And I'm wondering, if there's a chocolate factory here and Ghana produces a lot of cocoa, how then do we build that bridge where it will make it relatively easier for them to get access to cocoa, for the chocolate factory to also thrive? And then they can also export. It's helping each other. They don't have to go all the way back to the world market to buy cocoa, but then we can have that direct linkage and make sure we supply the cocoa. There are certain things here that they also produce that we believe that are relatively cheaper here for industries back home and across Africa. And so that is where we need to provide that linkage and that support to make trade and investment more profitable, for us. And one thing that I heard one of the poets on Wednesday say, that the wealth shouldn't just fill our pockets with money. It should go beyond that. So we need to protect each other, not just with money, but with the support that each and every one of us would need to enable all of us thrive, because we see ourselves as one.
One of the things that happens at these events, and I've been a journalist for many years and I noticed this, is when governments and experts have these discussions, a lot of times the citizens, average people, feel disconnected. And I think those are very important in making all of this a reality. Once the policies are in place, the people, getting them to embrace this whole idea of a global Africa initiative. What do you think, not only yourself as a government minister, but your colleagues around, not within Africa, but in the Caribbean, you can do to get young people excited, business people excited about the idea of a global Africa initiative, and then to buy into the ideas that are being discussed here?
The Caribbean and Africa, for that matter, they have a very youthful population. And now it's all about social media technology. And yesterday, everybody saw what was going on. So I think if we need to improve upon our technology and make sure these things are out there, so that even if they are not here to watch and to listen, out there, they see what is going on. And then us, as policymakers, should also be able to share and bring them along. And we can only bring them along, when we improve their capacity in terms of human resource. And that is why for Ghana, we have gone beyond free primary education to the secondary, senior high school education, to help them build another level and to build their capacity as well, for them to appreciate. And then we can also take them along with us. And now the AI, I think on Monday, Apple launched its AI version that Microsoft had already launched. And now it's all about that. And the youth are taking advantage of the technology space. And so we will thrive on that to make sure we bring them along, and then they can also embrace it, because you have about 40% youthful population in Africa and the Caribbean, and that is what we should use to bring them along.
Yeah. All right, last question. Yesterday you kind of emphasized what I believe P.J. Patterson, former Prime Minister of Jamaica, P.J. Patterson, said about the time for action is now. In closing, this is our last day. What would you want other leaders here to take away as we go back to our respective countries?
As we go back to our respective countries, I think we should take this with us, that enough of the talk. The policies are already there. How do we actualize these policies? It's now time for action. And then we cannot do it alone. But when we come together, nobody can stop us. And that is what I think we should take with us. Coming together, it's a formidable force, and nobody can stop us when we have an agenda to improve our trade and investment opportunities, for it to affect us all, not just for us to feel it in our pockets, but go beyond that. Show the love, show the unity, and embrace all.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Minister Asare.
And thank you for having me.
There you have it. Unity is the foundation for all of this. This whole idea of a global Africa initiative is going to require unity, and Minister Asare put it together quite nicely. So you are watching Afreximbank TV. I'm Janelle Prasad. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.